Let's create the best DIY fall decor ideas that you can totally try at home. Welcome to the Chic Show. Today is the Talented Creators Collaboration hosted by DIY with Aria and Lowly D's Creations. Check out their channels and our guest host and co-host channels in the description box below along with the playlist. For this project, I'm using one of these box signs from Dollar Tree, and I am also using one of Dollar Tree's peel and stick wallpapers. This is just a scrap piece that I had, so I'm kind of piecing it together because the whole frame won't show. I went ahead and painted the inside part of the frame just so that it would match a little better. This project was inspired by Tracy at Tracy's Country Crafts. I used a cracker box or a cereal box, and I just tore the pieces into the shapes that I was needing, which are going to be pumpkins, and then I'm going to be painting them with orange chalk paint. The smaller pumpkin, I actually added in some white paint with the orange paint so that I would get a lighter color. And then I kind of mixed the two together to make some details onto both pumpkins. I set these two aside to dry, and once they were dry, I took some tumbling tower blocks and I'm going to kind of place the blocks and the pumpkins where I'm going to want them in the frame. I do want the pumpkins raised up a little bit, so that's the purpose of the tumbling tower blocks. Once I know where I want them and I have placed down that removable wallpaper, I'm going to use some wood glue to glue the tumbling tower blocks in place. I'm also adding glue to the top of the blocks for the pumpkins. And then I just repeat the process for the other pumpkin. I did go ahead and set these aside to dry, and I did put something heavy on top of both pumpkins so that they would be held down. I used my miter shears to cut a stick in half, and I'm going to be using each half as the peduncle on my pumpkins. These little wood leaves are from Hobby Lobby, and I decided to paint them green, but I did also add some antique wax once they had dried because they were just a little too bright, and I wanted to kind of mute that color just a little bit. And then again, I used some glue and glued them in place. I added one of these chalkboard signs, I believe from Dollar Tree, and I just glued that in place as shown. I should have done this next part before I actually glued the pumpkins in place, but I did add some paint splatters with black and white paint. This part I also should have done ahead of time before I glued it down, but I did stamp on the word pumpkin using a white ink pad, and then because I didn't have any numbers, I just hand wrote the rest of it. To finish off this little shadow box, I added some Spanish moss, and I just tried to tuck it in back behind those pumpkins in places. I didn't really need to do this ahead of time because I do want some of it in front of the pumpkins. I also added a couple of little drop cloth bows to the pumpkins. I'd like to take a minute to wish a happy birthday to some of my crafty friends who have birthdays in September. One of our projects for this collaboration needed to include corn. So I am using Prairie Sunset by Fusion, and I'm going to paint this board front, sides, and back. I used my computer and printer and printed off the words sweet corn, and I'm using some tracing paper to trace the letters onto the sign. If you've had fresh sweet corn, then you know exactly how yummy it is, and there's always a man near our home that sets up a stand, and we always have to stop and get a big bag. This may seem a little bit backwards, but I'm going back with some green milk paint, and I forget what shade this is, but this is milk paint, and I'm going to be painting the majority of the sign with that green paint because I want the sweet corn to be yellow and I wanted the rest of the sign to be chippy, so that's why I did it backwards. I used my heat gun to dry the milk paint because it will give you some crackles and some texture. Must have forgotten to hit record, but once this was dry, I did go over it with some Jolie's dark wax because it does bring out that chippiness and makes the sign look a little bit more weathered and worn. Now I'm using some of my IOD's apothecary stamps, and I stamped on the word fresh. In the end, this part doesn't even show, so that's not even necessary. Now I'm going to be using 3 pieces of this corn from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to staple those to the sign. If you have not gotten any of these pumpkins from Hobby Lobby, I recommend you do so. They come in a package of 3, and on sale they're less than $2 a piece, I believe. But I'm going to be using this white pumpkin that is in the pack, and I'm going to be using this decoupage paper by the painted photographer that I got in Sonnet's Maker's Box. I'm tracing around it using a paintbrush and water because I want to tear the edges. Even though I did trace this out, I still tore it into the wrong shape, but in the end, it will be fine. Now I want to blend the edges of the paper in with the pumpkin, or the pumpkin in with the edges of the paper. So I'm using some Waverly chalk paint in sandstone, and it wasn't mixed up very well here, but once I mixed it up, I did get a darker color which matched almost perfectly with the edge of the paper. Now I'm going to be using some of DIY's liquid patina to decoupage this paper onto the pumpkin. I held the paper in place and started with a little starter strip at the top, and then I continued on, and I did give it a coat of the liquid patina on top as well. Just a reminder about the playlist in the description box below. Be sure and check out all the talented creators. I'm going to leave another video I think you might like right here. Thanks so much for watching. Remember to share the chic. Bye now.